president today dealing with his house of scandal by trying to spin the one that involves our friends and family who did make it back from Afghanistan and Iraq. His administration crumbling around him, quite literally in Iraq at the Justice Department and in Republican caucus rooms on Capitol Hill. And Mr. Bush today making his first visit to the Walter Reed Army Medical Center since the shoddy conditions and shocking conditions were exposed some 6 weeks ago. The commander-in-chief evidently less interested in swift change than in the new Stairmaster. Perhaps in another month and a half, Mr. Bush will see fit to turn his attention to the other scandals in his administration unfolding at the moment, like his former lawyer turned attorney general, who still believed, it seems, that he was just Mr. Bush's lawyer. Former Chief of Staff to Alberto Gonzales, Kyle Sampson, telling the Senate just yesterday, you will recall, that the Attorney General made, at best, inaccurate statements about his role in the firing of 8 federal prosecutors for political reasons. As a result, Mr. Gonzales today changing his story again from a variation of I was not involved to I do not recall being involved.
I don't recall being involved in deliberations involving the question of whether or not a U.S. attorney should or should not be asked to resign. My primary focus was ensuring that the White House was kept advised of what we were doing.
The Attorney General apparently now looking to testify to the Senate sooner rather than later, intending to ask the Judiciary Committee if he can move up his testimony. It probably would not be by more than a week. The Senate is now in recess until April 10th. He's due to speak at April 17th's sessions. Meanwhile, a deputy at the Justice Department, Michael Elston, offering his testimony today behind closed doors on Capitol Hill for word on whether his account conflicts with that of Mr. Gonzales. As they say, watch this space. Democrats on the Hill also seeking information from the president's alleged brain, Karl Rove. Information about a presentation by a White House aide given to government employees about how they could help Republican candidates in the 2008 elections. What would be a big no-no, to say the least, under the Federal Hatch Act, insisting on non-political conduct in those agencies. Mr. Rove and company also under investigation for having used non-government email accounts to conduct government business because they wanted to keep that business secret, and that, too, it would seem, in strict violation of federal law. Meanwhile, back at Walter Reed, the veterans advocacy group Veterans for America criticizing the president's visit today is nothing more than a photo op, seeing how he did not visit any of the areas like Building 18, most in need of change, and no cameras were permitted there. The president's prescription for change equally perplexing, to somehow fix the bureaucracy by creating even more bureaucracy to investigate. Weeks stretching into months, quite possibly into years, before anything might be done.
I met some of the soldiers who had been housed in Building 18. I was disturbed by their accounts of what went wrong. It is not right to have someone volunteer to wear a uniform and not get the best possible care. I apologize for what they went through, and we're going to fix the problem.
Let's turn now to our own Jonathan Alter, senior editor for Newsweek magazine. John, good evening.
Hey, Keith.
Does it seem as if most of these scandals surrounding this administration right now, one might say engulfing it, have this underlying theme of Karl Rove attempting to use the resources of the federal government to ensure his dream of a permanent Republican majority?
Well, there's no question that that's what he was planning to do, and had at least one meeting a week for the last 7 years to do that. And that's the thread that ties this, scandal together, this Justice Department scandal together. It was a concerted effort to put their people in and screw the Democrats. And so what they did is they broke all precedent, for instance, and started bringing voter fraud indictments just before an election to make it seem like the Democrats were the corrupt party, almost always in swing states. The prosecutors who were fired, with only one exception, all came from swing states. So they were trying to poison the well there before the election in violation of tradition. And you see a lot of professional prosecutors who are just outraged about this, Keith, whether they're Democrats or Republicans.
All right, so we've got the Pentagon with Tillman, we've got the Department of Justice, we've got the General Services Administration, where these meetings took place with the PowerPoint demonstrations. There was even something with Fish and Wildlife. They've got everybody here except the Visiting Nurse Association has been politically corrupted at this point. Is it possible in this, as we're beginning to get the full panorama here, is it possible to overstate the importance of the Democratic Congress in bringing these scandals to light? I mean, all of them seem to be under the radar for the first years of this administration. The last 2 months, we've seen to see all of them come to the surface. Is that Congress's doing?
Absolutely. This is what you and I talked about a lot last fall. This was what was at stake in this election, is you've got to have subpoena power. The press can't do it itself when it comes to rooting out wrongdoing. So now the Democratic committee chairman can haul these people up on Capitol Hill, and some of Karl Rove's former aides are not going to have any executive privilege protection. So you're going to see a lot more testimony in the weeks to come. And I think Rove, over the course of this year, is going to be in deep doo-doo on a variety of issues. We don't know which one will do him in, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's not working in the White House by the end of the year.
Is there a point, though, at which, is there a tipping in reverse point where the scandals might begin to work in the administration's favor, not just in terms of scandal fatigue, not just in terms of keeping attention focused off Iraq, but also in terms of trying to keep all the scandals straight at this point? I mean, you really need to write this stuff down now.
Well, you can't keep it straight without a scorecard, but that's true of a lot of complicated Washington scandals. And remember, this doesn't have to be Watergate. It doesn't have to, blow the president out of the water. But what it does do is it opens a window on the way they work and the way they think. Just to give you one quick example with probably the most famous prosecutor, Patrick Fitzgerald, when it came time to appoint him, Karl Rove told the Republican senator from Illinois, no, don't put him in. He might be too independent, and go after the governor of Illinois, the Republican governor at the time, who was a crook, later convicted. So clearly what Rove was trying to do is, in jurisdiction by jurisdiction, protect Republicans, go after Democrats, and essentially turn our criminal justice system into what they have in a banana republic.
Lastly, John, am I right about the impact of this latest part of the Pat Tillman story, that unlike fired U.S. attorneys or anything else that's on the table right at the moment, this is the kind of visceral thing that anybody can understand, that anybody can get mad at, that there's evidence the president could have easily, if it's not certain, it could have easily been true that he played politics like an insider trader on Wall Street with a famous dead soldier?
Well, if that comes out, I agree with you. I think it's an easier to understand story. But this is a pattern, Keith. I did a story for NBC News a couple of months ago about a soldier from California who was killed in Iraq. His mother was told for 2 years that it was an ambush. And finally, the Pentagon admitted that he was killed by the very Iraqi troops that he was training, shot in the back by the troops that he was training, and they had kept this from her for 2 years. So this covering up of the truth in the interest of public relations is a pattern, and I hope it's something that we hear more about in the days ahead.
Unfortunately, it certainly will be. Newsweek Magazine's senior editor, our own Jonathan Alter. Great thanks for joining us tonight, John.
Thanks, Keith.